Welcome to Athlete Talk, the podcast where we make conversations about sports and mental health easy to fit into your everyday routine. We'll be breaking down topics like the future of mental health in college athletics, the impact of NIL on mental health, and more. Follow us on social media at Where Athletes Talk to stay connected and be part of the conversation. Welcome to this first episode where you will meet the founder of Athlete Talk, the app designed to bring mental health resources into athletes' everyday lives, Dr. Emmett Gill. I'm your host for today, Kelsey O'Connor, an intern with Athlete Talk, but we're welcoming our founder, Dr. Emmett Gill. So, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Gill.
Thank you so much, Miss O'Connor. Or since we're doing a podcast, can I call you Kelsey?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. It really excited to get this off the ground. So thank you for spearheading this effort.
Of course. Thank you. So, Dr. Gill, tell us a little bit about why you started Athlete Talk and why mental health and athletics is so important.
Yeah, so Kelsey, we really started Athlete Talk to try and reach more athletes and to reach athletes in a different way, right? So when we typically think of mental health, we think about face-to-face meetings with the provider or group meetings with the provider. And I really think that digital mental health is sort of the next frontier, especially if we look at platforms like BetterHelp, for example. So one, to deliver mental health content to athletes in a different way, and two, to provide them with an intimate space to engage in mental health and wellness work. I guess the third is to reach more, right? Because everybody's not going to go to a group. Everyone isn't going to sit down with a mental health provider. So some people are going to use the app. Some people are going to do their own research and find self-help methods. So those are the primary three reasons that we started Athlete Talk.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I know you founded Athlete Talk in 2020 when there was this huge need for reaching athletes where they were at because there was this lack of community. How have you seen kind of the need for this evolve since then in 2020 to now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one, I think, and you're spot on. One, I feel since the pandemic, more folks are doing the face-to-face piece with counselors, or they're doing the meetings virtually with counselors, right? So that's one way that I think that has changed. And I think just the sheer number of athletes that we have, whether it's high school, college, Olympic, professional sports, the number of athletes who are working on their mental health and wellness is increasing. For us, that also is good because you wonder, you go to a therapist, once a week, let's say, for example. Well, what are you doing those other 6 days of the week? You still got to work on your mental health and wellness. Or if you go a couple of times every other week, then you still have 12 days out of the week where you need to work on your mental health and wellness. So the landscape is changing, but what I'm excited about is I think that there's going to be a place for Athlete Talk as we make the shift and break down the stigma.
Yeah. Well, and I love that Athlete Talk really does bring mental health content into an everyday routine space through your phone. And as an athlete with such a busy schedule, it can be so hectic and it can be really difficult to make an appointment with someone or really incorporate that into kind of the same way you would practice every day, really keeping your mind healthy and prioritizing your wellness every day. And I know you actually mentioned today you're at a panel for the NFLPA and you all were talking about self talk. How do you think absorbing content through your phone about mental health and wellness contributes to your self talk and the way that you think because your input really is your self talk and your output?
Oh, wow. Another great question. So, today, Brian Dawkins, former safety for the Philadelphia Eagles and Hall of Famer, he said, my self-taught game is incredible. The way that I talk about myself, that's one of the things that he excels at. And I think that's so very important. And I think there are a lot of, again, whether it's athlete talk or it's maybe it's your feed on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, there's a lot in terms of social media content and in terms of evidence-based content that's related to positive self-talk. Sometimes when you raise that question, I wonder though, there's also a lot of pockets of negative talk and negative sort of culture, Debbie Downer type stuff. So I think the phone is a great place to do that. Some of the athletes that I work with, I tell them, right, what's your script for your positive self-talk? Like, what's your go-to phrase for yourself when you really need to dig down deep and pump yourself up? And so the other piece, though, is important is, and with athlete talk, is it's not just about the individual's mental health, right? You know this, Kelsey. We're trying to build community, right? So it's not just what you are admitting in terms of your positive self-talk, but it's also your teammates. It's also your athletic part, right? And so it's not just a micro level thing, but it goes to the meso as well as the macro level.
Yeah, I actually never even thought about that, but that's so true because it's really encouraging when you have teammates or other athletes at your school that are talking about mental health, but there's not always time for that or space for that unless it's at an event or it's kind of outside of practice. And so, something I really do love about Athlete Talk is that you can see your teammates going through plans and we're adding these features to add friends. And so, you're kind of able to even share content with each other or share an encouraging post or go through a plan together. And it's this way to create community, even though it's on a digital space and that might seem like it's just geared towards an individual, but it really does foster community on teams and within organizations when you're sharing the content and going through it together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to change our tagline to include, it's changing the game of mental health in sports. But not only are we changing the game for individuals, we're trying to change the game for organizations and help change their culture. Because if you think about this catchphrase that we use, breaking down the stigma, right? Well, when we break down that stigma, now we're providing opportunities for conversation, for relationships, for support. That breaking down is really important, and it's important that we continue to work on that.
Yeah. And there really is still a stigma, as much as that conversation has been getting better over the years. Like, there is still a stigma around mental health. And so, what would you say to athletes who are maybe nervous about talking about mental health or maybe even like thinking about using athlete talk? How would you encourage them just to like step foot into this space?
Yeah, I guess going back to this panel with the NFLPA, I think it was oh man, Brandon, former Bears, Brandon Marshall.
Brandon Marshall, yes.
I was like, oh, it's that, I'm getting
I
old,
should have known that. I'm from Chicago. I should have known that.
but first of all, shout out to Brandon Marshall. He's been a super advocate for mental health. I mean, he put himself out there when a lot of people were not putting himself out there. And so, shout out to Brandon Marshall. I think that the important thing when we talk about mental health and wellness is what Brandon talked about today. He talked about, educating athletes about how mental health is a process, right? Just because you get upset, you're seeking some emotional regulation and you breathe for 10 seconds and it doesn't work, that's not abnormal, right? It's a process. You've got to go through a process of self-awareness, of identifying the issues that you want to work on, understanding the therapies and how they work. And then you begin to see outcomes. And he said that, Kelsey, because athletes understand process. They understand the process from the interleague and the combine to their rookie year to, when they're in their third year as veterans, they know what the process is. And so as therapists, if we're able to articulate what the process is to athletes, then they're more inclined to buy into that. And that was one of the huge takeaways for me because, oftentimes when we're sitting in that chair, we're simply trying to, first of all, we're excited that the athletes are in our office, right?
Yeah.
And then we try and go through this process of trying to uncover things and make them feel comfortable. I was reminded today that you need to step back and talk about process and how this works, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's the way the medications are going to work. Process is so important.
Yeah, that's such a good point too, because I think you and I were even talking about language and the language used as student athletes because there really just is this whole separate world. And yeah, athletes are committed to a process. And so if you're trying to meditate and it doesn't work for one day, it doesn't mean it didn't work at all. Because when you're taking reps on the field and you have a bad game, it doesn't mean that you should never practice again because it doesn't work. It just means that you bounce back and you keep trying. And so it's such a good parallel for the same with mental wellness and mental health. And I think even just going back to athlete talk of just getting those mental wellness reps in, you're not going to feel it every day, but you're going to maintain and you're going to get stronger and you're not always going to see an immediate change, but over time, it's really going to benefit you on the field, off the field, confidence in your own skin, and all these different ways.
That's the other piece. It's the transferable skills. This is going to benefit you, like you said, Kelsey, off the field and on the field, or on the field and in life, whatever the case may be. Another thing that we hear in sports a lot as of late for the last couple of years is trust the process, right? So you do have to trust the process, but you also have to develop your own process. And one of the things that Brian Dawkins, said today is he said, I engage in a little bit of therapy, but my process really involves my faith. As opposed to someone like Brandon Marshall, he was like, I'm all in with the therapy, different types of therapy on different issues. Right now, he's in the season of dealing with his traumas. So, really talking through what it's supposed to look like and not being so ubiquitous is really important.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Like, just even as we talk about professional athletes and them having a different process and handling mental health and figuring out because they probably didn't know right away what process worked for them. They probably had to try different things and really get into a groove of what was beneficial for them. So who knows how they got there, but then they were able to find it. And now that they're sharing that with other people, that's so fantastic and so encouraging. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm a former athlete, and so it's really cool to just kind of talk about all of these things and these topics. And so I know I we could talk about this for so long, but we've been trying to keep our episodes bite sized, kind of the same way our content is to fit into an athlete's busy schedule, coaches, organizations. We know that schedules are demanding. And so fitting this kind of content into your everyday is important to us. And so we will definitely be talking about more mental health and sport topics. Dr. Gill, is there anything you want to leave our listeners with after our first episode? Any encouragement, call to action, last nuggets of advice?
No, we just really, yes. I said no. Yes, there is. No, we just really want to create a space. First of all, again, thankful to Miss O'Connor, to Kelsey for taking on this task, but this really a space where we can talk about mental health and sports issues that are ripped from the headlines, right? I mean, there's so much that we could talk about, NIL, revenue sharing and mental health, the recent policy changes by Trump and the NCAA. This is all a part of the work that we have to do, right? The person and the environment. So, whether it's sending us ideas, about potential podcast topics, I'm just really excited to bring, again, content that's ripped from the headlines. Let's talk about it, let's process it, and let's have a little bit of fun with this.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to talk about all these things. So, thank you all so much for listening to our first episode. To echo what Dr. Gill said, we're excited to have you with us at Athlete Talk. Thank you so much. Please feel free to follow us on social media at Where Athletes Talk to get connected. And like he said, let us know what sports and mental health topics you'd like to hear next. We'll see you next time.